Welcome to Be Brilliant with Jing Lang, the podcast dedicated to those seeking to excel in every aspect of their lives. Through conversations with her guests, Jing will tease out personal stories, helpful tips, and proven strategies to help you elevate your life and reach your highest potential. Get ready to dive in and discover what it means to be truly brilliant. And now, here's your host, Jing Lang.
I'm so thrilled to have with us today Adrienne Lieberthal. Adrienne Lieberthal is the founder and CEO of Athena Actuarial. Adrienne founded the company in August 2020 after a decade of experience in the U.S. pension consulting industry. Over 4 years, she has grown the company's annual revenue from $90,000 to $3.5 million. Outside of work, Adrienne enjoyed trying out breweries around the Twin Cities, getting outside to hike with her two dogs, Rocky and Shelby, and watching, playing, and being around any kind of sports or competitive activity. She and her partner Josh recently welcomed their first daughter, Lena Benedette, on December 15, 2023. Okay, so Adrienne, thank you so much for being on the show. And tell us where you are today.
I am in our headquarters in Minneapolis, Minnesota. We're located downtown, a very small office space, but it has a lot of personality and is a great home base for us at Athena.
I love the personality behind you. Are there some stories to the two people you have there?
Oh, well, they're actually, the funny story is they were two things that were on our wedding registry, but my husband ordered them in the wrong size. They didn't fit in our house. So they're like two, it's Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Michelle Obama, just really unique leaders that I always was really excited to put in our home. But Hip Story is this really cool artist that pulls things out of their personality and puts it into the art. So they obviously it's not a real depiction of how they presented themselves, but it pulls some things like RBG has a tattoo that says I dissent on her neck in the picture. But Hip Story is a very cool artsy thing that does this with a lot of celebrities.
That's incredible. I did not recognize them, but now that you say the names, I can definitely recognize. That's so cool. And I'm so sorry for our audio viewers. We're talking about the two giant art behind Adrienne's desk in her office. It looks amazing. So, Adrienne, can you please tell us about your journey leading to founding Athena?
Yeah, so it really started in 2020 when we were all going through that reckoning. Once the stay-at-home orders started, I was living in Seattle with my partner at the time, my now husband. And I think when all of the noise was just taken away of life, even socializing and community and everything, and we all just everything fell away and we're just sitting in our homes trying to figure out where do we go from here. I think a lot of people had a moment of what was I doing before? What was it for? Is it something that I want to keep doing? Am I fed up with something? There was just a whole reckoning, I think internationally, with how we were going to move forward as a society after we didn't even know when the whole order was going to end but I really started to feel drawn towards entrepreneurship. I entertained myself by taking a class in analytics to try to beef up some of my own capabilities in that space. I started building a business plan for a consulting firm that I thought I'd start decades into the future. And I focused on doing projects at work that really energized me. Personally, I worked at a large firm and I loved the corporate ladder. I loved the climbing, the competitiveness almost with yourself, and then being told, this is what you need to do to get ahead. And sometimes it felt almost unfair. And you're like, I'm going to get it anyway. And I loved it. And it was interesting. I started, I think, to notice once I became a manager, how challenging it was if you didn't love it or if you weren't, if the mold wasn't set up for you. And I saw a lot of people that I was working with and for and, and managing that just didn't fit the professional mold. And we were missing out on what they had to bring to the table. And so that was really the beginning of the idea that, oh, what if a firm was structured in a way that brought that out more? It would benefit the employees. It would benefit the clients they serve. It would the whole ecosystem would benefit. So in August 2020, I only made it to the end of August before I was like, oh, I'm just gonna incorporate, and then gave my notice. Actually had a great reaction from my employer, and worked there for 4 more months because I was still getting paperwork going, and I was working on a project that it was a really hard time to hire, so it was going to leave them in a bad spot. So then my first official day operating Athena was on my 31st birthday on December 18th, 2020. So life kind of picked up from there. I was engaged a few days later, got married, welcomed our first daughters while scaling Athena from 1 to 25 employees and hitting these revenue milestones. It's been a very exciting ride leaving the corporate structure. Definitely, it's not that I've not looked back. I definitely sometimes am like, is there an easier way? I mean, especially I wasn't paying myself for a very long time. So it's like, is there an easier way to make money? And there definitely is, but probably not one that's as fulfilling, I think, and not the same kind of this right kind of hard where you feel like you're really operating in your unique ability.
Wow. How long did you not pay yourself?
Oh, it was on and off because even when I thought it was time to start, I ended up having to put back into the business because we would get this opportunity, and professional services is a really hard way to grow. There's no hockey stick growth that you might see in some other industries where once you get scale, you can sell and grow really fast. In professional services, every new contract you have to hire to, so your expenses grow relative to your revenue. So I think it was probably 2.5 years until I started pulling anything. And then even then, I was just a constant guilt, honestly, because I felt like I was never doing enough and that I didn't want to take from this asset that I was trying to build, but also I didn't want to put myself before the employees in terms of a bonus so that's a constant challenge, is regularly getting into the habit of paying yourself as an entrepreneur.
I'm struggling with that right now.
Yeah, it's hard.
So earlier you mentioned for professional services that it's really hard. The hockey stick shape is hard. How would you describe that? So I was hoping exponential distribution, which obviously is not the case.
Oh.
So how would you describe that pickup going from the 90,000 to the 3.5?
It's a lot of start and stop, and then make a little bit of money and then not make money at all. It's up and down, because if you think about, even once you land a big contract and you hire, you are taking on the risk and the time that person needs to actually get up and running. And so until they're operating at a regular productivity, that's all on the employer to carry them. And then once they're up and running and they're generating the revenue, you might not get paid for 90 days. So there really is this full disconnect between the very exciting moment of an award, which happens in government in these very, it's like a public bid process, and then they announce an award. And then from there, you get under contracting. It's a very long-tailed process. So some pursuits maybe 3 or 4 years. And now you've landed the award, and now you have to hire to the contract or shuffle around to make it work. And then, so I think the growth is if you look at the sales, the most exciting times is when these big awards come in. And then you have a huge dip in profitability because you're trying to grow that top line revenue, but until you have to take on so many expenses to get there. So growth in professional services is very expensive. And there's a reason why you really want to have in mind where you're trying to go from the beginning. Because if you want to get to a 5-person firm, then it really changes the way that the types of clients you go after and the way that you want to get to that 5-person steady state and then make that machine profitable, as opposed to if you want to grow to a larger base of employees, then you need to be just comfortable investing that whole way to get there, because it's not very profitable to grow quickly. That's what I've found.
When you and I chat before, you had mentioned a scary moment you and your partner has. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I mean, there's just an inevitable scary moments around payroll. I think anyone who has employees hits those moments of a cash crunch, and it's hard to see it coming because, $50 million companies can have a cash crunch. If you grow really fast and then you have one of your biggest payers just has a glitch in their system and they're not able to pay you for 3 months, all of a sudden you now are a week away and seeing that there won't be enough cash in the account to hit payroll. And I think that those moments are inevitable. And I mean, they're more normal than maybe we realize when we're employees, but it's also the burden that I think the founder has to carry. It is not helpful or useful for employees to know that that might be happening behind the scenes because it's distracting, it's scary. But it also, I think when you work in a startup environment, really when you work for any employer, I think you're essentially just announcing that you trust that leadership to make those really hard decisions and do whatever they need to do to make sure payroll hits. We've never missed payroll. So, and for any of our employees listening, they may not have even known that we've gotten that close. But I think the first couple of years, especially when we went from 5 to 15 employees in one day, we hired employees on March 1st, 2023. That was, we knew the opportunity was there, but that the getting everything to line up and then inevitably, somebody isn't able to get into the system or there's something that slows them down from getting productive. I think there's scary moments that come with that. But really for me, I think the scariest times have been the clash between personal and professional, and that I was viewing it really as a clash instead of trying to find balance, like trying to take a week off for my wedding or taking what maternity leave looked like for me, and knowing that these life moments are a huge part of my vision for myself. But I think that they really test you as an entrepreneur in terms of the infrastructure you set up or not, and whether it's possible for you to step away. So I think there's scary business moments. There's scary moments personally of could I take my eye off the ball and will it still be there? And then just the ultimate responsibility. Once you carry payroll, you owe it to these employees to give it everything you have to make sure that this still continues to move forward.
It's congratulations. It's amazing you did all that without, like you said, mentally having the employee to share the burden, because there's nothing they can do about it anyway. But for you to carry all that, that's a lot. So earlier you mentioned briefly that once you have an award, a contract, you could count on that revenue for a number of years, or do you have to do things every year? How does that work in terms of your revenue pattern?
Well, one of the positives of government work is it tends to be longer term contracts, but there's always some sort of clause that the client has to exercise an option year. They're usually called, or you have to be doing your job in order to continue on, but you wouldn't have to bid on it again every year. Usually the biggest contracts can be 10 years long. Most are 3 to 5 years. And so it's nice for a growing business because in other industries, in other areas of consulting, it's project based. So it's really hard to hire because you don't know when it's going to be. It's like feast and famine. So you don't know when the projects will drop off and nothing will be there to fill the spot. But in our work, you can count on 10-year contracts as long as you do a good job in delivery. And so you can be more confident making a hire because the work should be there as long as we do well. So that comes into managing the client experience on the other side. But Yeah, it's nice for these longer term. The challenge can be when not all of our work is like 10 full-time employees. Some of our projects are, but others are just little pieces, and they kind of require our employees to get really good at balancing multiple projects and time management, those skills, because sometimes we just have to make it work.
Can you tell us about the main types of the work that you do?
Yeah, so we do services across the public sector, state, local, federal agencies, and some other mission-driven private sector entities. But for the most part, we operate half the time as a subcontractor to other firms, and the other half as a prime contractor. It's called in the government, where we're directly providing services to an agency. Some of our subcontract gigs came about because different states, cities, and federal agencies have requirements for participation by small business, women-owned business, what's called a disadvantaged business enterprise. And basically, in our industry, there are so few women-owned businesses that the case is made that there must be some barriers to entry for those businesses. Otherwise, more would exist. And so that's gotten us to the table a lot, but it really just gets you either the interview or the initial, the spark that gets you the meeting. From there, we've led with our capabilities and grown in Medicaid, pension. We have some employer healthcare work. We do what we call actuarial services and strategic advisory across these different areas. And so we really like the combo of, we have some traditional actuarial projects, valuations and pricing, things that are, I do think you have to be good at that in order to do the non-traditional consulting. You got to have your core really strong. But then the non-traditional stuff, the special cases, the special problems that we're solving, and bringing in, we have a variety of skill sets at Athena, both actuarial and even clinical, things that really can bring in the other side of what's happening behind the numbers. And one of our principals is a nurse and consultant who can really almost humanize that data that we as actuaries are looking at just as things moving across a spreadsheet.
Wow, that's incredible. Um, oh, I meant to ask this earlier. Athena, where does the name come from?
Yeah, so Athena actually was the goddess. She's known as the goddess of war, and she's also the goddess of mathematics.
Oh,
And so that was like a really like an early thing I was drawn to. But also, if you look at the stories of Athena, she never waged war on the offensive. It was always in defense of somebody who was not able to defend themselves. So it's like a nuance in being the goddess of war, but I think, really speaks to a lot of the values we have of wanting to do projects that improve the lives of marginalized communities, and wanting to focus on the intersection of equity and actuarial work. And I think even the way that we want to employ, we aspire to employ in a way that allows people to bring their full self to work and not be fearful of the repercussions. And so I think that was a very values-based name. And it's been really cool because a lot of the values and the mission that went along with selecting the name Athena 4 years ago have just continued to ring true through all of the change and growth. They still are our foundation as a business, even with new leaders and things that people coming in and really making it their own.
So you have mentioned before that you're very competitive, like you enjoy competitive sports, and when you're in consulting, you enjoy the climbing the ladder. As you're describing the culture at Athena, it seems very empowering, right? You want to lift people up. Do you ever see that as a clash between the competitive urge versus the nurturing urge? How does that work?
It's funny because I think my competitiveness is something that a lot of people, like friends and family, pick on me about, because I love gambling. I love playing competitive games, but a lot of it comes from, I love I think the fun that can come with competing and, always having a goal that you're aspiring to get to. But my favorite ways to compete are with a team. And so I think that that's what comes through with Athena. Like when we're doing our monthly happy hour and doing trivia, like I definitely want to win. Like there's that's definitely like, but I also think it can be in good fun and it can create a fun vibe. But I think that in terms of our team, I think that the competitiveness comes out in that we're all here trying to win in this environment that is in a lot of ways stacked against us. So one of the things that my business partner says all the time is go fight win. And I think that that's like very much a part of our culture that like we just have to keep trying. We just have to keep going. We have to like I think that there's not a competitiveness amongst our employees. I think it comes through in this team-based, we're excited to get these awards and we're excited for what it means for our business and to create jobs and to continue this growth. And I think that it really aligns. But I think that it's because we're all on the same team, you know?
You mentioned your business partner. So recently, I guess you can correct whether it's recently, how recent was it? You have had 100% control of Athena until when that happened. So now it's a partnership model. So walk us through why do you change that and how has it worked out so far?
Yeah, it's interesting because early Athena days, I felt that when I first mapped out my vision for the company, that a partnership model would really align to the way I wanted to run the business. But I was very ill-equipped to know what it took to become a partnership. I didn't understand how you got there. I just said, I think that a partnership model where it's consensus driven, but everybody kind of does their job and is trusted to do their job it could be aligned to the way that I want to run our business. And in spring of 2023, I kept this on my radar. The two key employees were aware that I wanted to convert to a partnership at some point. I just didn't really know what it took. And honestly, I really didn't believe that anyone would want to put their own money into this. I just was like, didn't really think that that would be on their list of things to invest in. So I had started to think more seriously about it because I knew I was pregnant and was going to want to step away in some way towards the end of the year. I'd been advised against converting to a partnership or really just giving away equity in because it can be so valuable later. And I think that anybody who's been in through a messy partnership being dissolved was very insistent that like you really don't want to or need to do this. There's other ways to create that dynamic. But I think that really I knew the life that I wanted for myself included balance, and there's just a different switch that goes on when somebody is an owner versus an employee, the way that they look at the business. And I knew that I wanted to share that mental load. I think that's part of the stress is it's not just the time, it's just carrying all this alone. And nobody knows your own professional or personal aspirations like you do. So I think it's really important to surround yourself with amazing mentors and advisors, but you don't have to listen to everything everybody says. You have to filter and say, I hear it. I understand the risks of this decision I want to make. But at the end of the day, you have to go with your gut. And I knew that it felt to me like I had these two people that I could go into business with that were truly role models to me, that I aspired to be more like. I genuinely enjoyed spending time with. And the opportunity for them to buy into this business was not going to come around every day. And the longer that we grew, the more like they were a part of this growth. And it was the right way to align that to the owners. I think that I was just looking at these two potential partners and their commitment to their families and their careers. And I knew it was something that I wanted to spend time around. It was something that I knew would be one of the keys to me taking a step back for maternity leave. And I think it's really important to surround yourself with these kinds of people and not let opportunities like that pass by. So it's great because we have this personal relationship. Greg was my boss in my last job. He was my coach. So we've worked together like in our past lives as well. And I think it's really important to have that personal relationship and trust each other because things get hard. The business challenges get really hard. And you have to be able to talk openly about different solutions, whether they're good or bad for each of us, and know that you trust and respect each other. And it's not personal. You're all just trying to solve the same problem. So I think that it's been great for us. It's added this layer sometimes of friction in us debating how we should move forward, where I used to just, decide and move. But it's good. It's really good to slow down and make decisions. I mean, they just impact a lot more as the employee base grows. There's just a lot more to think about with different decisions. So it's been great for us.
So you have received offer to buy the company, someone else to purchase Athena, and you have turned it down. What's your plan for the company in like say 20 years, something long term?
My vision for Athena is to become this thriving multi-generational partnership that really sets the standard as an employer and provider of actual services, of advisory services in government spaces. And I think that multi-generational partnership, the way that looks is that the business has to be thriving and profitable enough to be attractive to buy into. It has to provide each of us what we're looking for in our own personal and professional lives. If it's a phased out retirement or shifting to a board position and remaining an owner or being bought out over time in a structured settlement, some sort of like the way that we could keep that. We're a partnership, but we're not one of the large, really regulated partnerships that has a full formula and a model. It's very flexible for us to create opportunity for people to really own a part of what they're helping to build. And I think the best part with the three of us is we're really open to others being a part of it. I think that we're strategic in when it would be time for someone to join the partnership, and we have another role at Athena principal that operates in the same capacity in terms of they can bind the firm in contracts, things like that. But to really be an owner, I think it's a different mindset. It's a different way of looking for what you're getting out of work because quite honestly, the compensation is not higher than the other people at the firm. So it's like we're looking at this as a long-term play. And I think that it's really important that all of us are on board with this vision that will also be profitable. And we hope at some point will help all of us, create wealth for our families and for the people that work at Athena. But I think that in order to get where we want to go, we're getting really solid now on that vision, that what we want to do 10 to 20 years into the future, because it makes the day-to-day decisions just fall into place.
You mentioned compensation earlier. It seems to me that Athena is very much a mission-driven company in addition to provide quality professional services. When you are making the hires up now, 25 employees, do you see people more drawn to one side versus another, or it comes together for them as a package and they evaluate together as a package?
In terms of employee versus...
In terms of compensation versus everything else.
Oh, I like our value proposition as an employer.
Yes.
It definitely has people drawn to something else. I think for us, we as a growing company, we aspire to continue to compensate closer and closer to market, but it's just not in the cards for us a lot of the time. We're having to find the people who want to help grow something and the people who trust that when it happens, we'll take care of them. And I think that every step of the way for the early joiners, I think they've seen that to be true, that their hard work definitely goes, it's valued. They are, to the extent that we can, we pay equitably. We distribute the limited resources we have very equitably. And we put benefits in place as soon as we can afford them, as soon as we have the size that, like, you need to be a certain size to get employer health care, things like that. But I think that when they're looking at Athena, it's it does require a lot of trust because there's a lot less on paper that they can point to than you would if you get this blow away job offer from a large company. But I also think the people coming to us are really, they're looking for work-life balance, and that means something different to everybody. And I think that in doing that, there a lot of the ways that we, I think, differentiate ourselves is just by the people that work here. They're the people who, when someone needs to be out for leave, for parental leave, they're the ones who work double time to make sure that their peer can do that. Like having the right people here and knowing that things ebb and flow in order to all have the flexibility that we aspire to have, I think is the big differentiator more than any policy or any benefit, honestly, than we can afford. It's the culture and the dynamic.
I love that. Let's go back a little bit. You were a hockey player. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, I played field hockey at the University of Virginia. I was a goalkeeper, and it's a very popular sport in Pennsylvania where I grew up, but not so much where I live in the Midwest now. It definitely formed so much about who I was, not only playing a sport competitively in college, playing at that Division I level, but just the whole concept of putting a team before yourself and putting a long-term gain over a short term. I mean, when you're 18 years old, 4 years feels like a very long term. And I think that there's the power of learning how to sacrifice for something bigger than you, and the excitement you get when that is successful. There's also power in the relationships you build when you're going through something like that. And I think that that's what I walked away from college with, is the relationships with my teammates and other athletes at UVA. I think it's a very intense academic environment in addition to athletics. So learning, there's so many skills that I think as a student athlete there that you learn. I think most notable for me was that I learned later was really what was getting me through my rounds of interviews at Towers Watson, was that there was an athlete within the business that was advocating for me. I did not have a high enough GPA to probably even get an interview by their standards. I was really, I think, just working really hard. And I think that they saw that there's something there that maybe all the other technical stuff could be taught if someone's willing to work hard enough. And I think that's formed how I hire also, is this looking for this grit, this, who cares what your GPA was? Tell me about a time that you failed and then picked yourself up. I think that's really formed a lot of the way that we look at what a potential successful employee could be too.
I love that you mentioned grit. Is that something that you, Adrienne, felt you always had access supply of, or is that something acquired, or can someone else learn grit?
There's been so many interesting studies on grit in the last couple decades. I know the book by Angela Duckworth, Grit, is really,
Yes.
It was like
the TED Talk.
Yeah, so eye-opening to me. I think on some things, I mean, I'm being from Philadelphia, I think it's a very gritty city. I think in sports, where we were a very sports obsessed household, and I think they are just always, feel like they have to work harder than everyone else. They're always misunderstood. They're pretty mean. Like, it's like this gritty city. And actually the Philadelphia Flyers mascot is named Gritty, which is hilarious. He's like the world's best mascot. Follow him on Instagram. But I think the spirit of perseverance for me, I think I had an excellent role model in my mom. I think that she really showed the value of resilience and hard work and this fierce determination to forge a path for a life worth living. Like, whatever that meant through whatever challenges, she never focused on when the deck was stacked against her. She never was like, oh, that employer shouldn't have done that, or this situation shouldn't have gone that way. It's not fair. I think it's why I have very little patience for that, life isn't fair attitude. I mean, there's certainly like times where life isn't fair. But I think that when life has those ups and downs, and what my mom taught me is to not take the downs so personally, like this job doesn't work out, pick yourself up and get another one, and take very little time to feel bad for yourself. You get a moment, but I think that this idea that if you let life take you down, it will. I think that if you just size up the roadblock, the challenge, the individual who's standing between you and what you want, and find another way to get there, I think that's the only reason Athena made it to where we are now. If I've had some pretty discouraging conversations and losses, and in government work, you get used to losing. You get used to a lot of no's. You get used to, and that's in any entrepreneur. You get used to a lot of things not going your way, but then you just find a way around it, and you find levity in doing it, and you find people that you really like doing it with. But in terms of, was it always an excess supply? I think it's a muscle that maybe some people are born more with it, but I think more frequently it's coming through these lived experiences, But I think that grit is like the number one thing I hire for, is looking for that, because I do believe it's the hardest thing to find. It's really hard to interview for also, because people tend to know the stories that want to be told in an interview. It's hard to get under the surface. But I think that in finding that quality, it creates that as a quality of your culture. And that's really important, to all be in it together and feel like, we're all here, sometimes struggling. Sometimes the day is great. Sometimes the projects you work on are great. Sometimes not so much. And we all know that we're here for a greater purpose.
Love that. And I think it's so appropriate and vivid to think that it's a muscle that you can build on, because yes, you can, the more you train it, the stronger you will get. Any advice that you have for entrepreneurs?
I think that a lot of it comes down to some of that. Probably what creates that grit is, don't take your first no so seriously, and definitely don't take it personally. Listen to what you're like, tease it out, really ask, is there something else I could have done to be able to have you make a different decision? And just, I'm trying to build a small business. Any advice is helpful. People tend to like to help if they're not able to actually take the risk to work with you, and you are perceived as risky in any new entity. But I think that not taking that first no personally and just using it to build and find another way around is just critical. There's no other way to keep building a business. I think the other thing is, you may be more entrepreneurial than you realize. If you have all these ideas and you're not sure how to build it, just find other people who have, and you may either be inspired to join one of them, or you'll just surround yourself with people who are both supportive, who are mentors, who are advisors. Again, people love to help. And I think that you never know who would be a client someday too, once you get to a certain size. And I think that is true whether you're working in a big organization or you want to start your own, is there's just nothing like the strength of a network. And it just makes it more fun if you're doing it alongside other people who are struggling through it. And then I think the last is to embrace the challenges and think about, is this the right kind of hard? Is this the kind of hard I'm uniquely able to fill? I mean, at some point when you're able to hire for the things that don't fit that category, that's very nice, because then you feel like someone else could do this better than me. But I think if it feels like the right kind of hard, like you're uniquely able to solve those problems, then you're in the right place. If it was easy, everybody would do it.
Well, that makes me feel very good, because I've heard more than one no already. I would say many, many no's. But yeah, thank you for that. Is there anything you want to share with the audience here? Anything I haven't asked that you wish I did?
I think that something that's really important for me to acknowledge over and over again is how, as a working mother and entrepreneur, how important it was for me. I wouldn't be where I was without the supportive partnership that I have with my husband. And I think that that's something that he would never acknowledge that, like, I wouldn't have eaten for 2 years because he just took on making dinner and bringing it to me while I kept working. And I was doing these 12, 14-hour days, just nonstop and just cranking in, like, the reminder to just get up and take a breath. And he works in communications, so he's really helpful for me to bounce ideas off of. And I think that it's in that partnership, in your relationship with your family, in relationship with friends. I think in particular, paving this path as an entrepreneur and also aspiring to have the unpredictability of children. I think that partnership for me is something I just reflect on often, that, like, you can't do this alone. And whatever that looks like for you, whether it's a partner or just like having the right circle of friends and peers around, and you need the people who, when you're sitting there and you're like, this is just not going to work, you need the people that believe in you more than you do. And that's, I think, what I'm very thankful to have in my husband.
That is amazing. I love it. This is a wonderful place to stop. Thank you so much for joining us today, Adrienne. Learned a ton, and all the best with Athena.
Thank you so much. It was great to talk to you today.
That's a wrap for today's episode of Be Brilliant with Jing Lang. We hope you found valuable insights and motivation to fuel your journey. Be sure to like and subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and YouTube. And share this with 3 people in your life endeavoring to achieve personal greatness. Remember, brilliance is within you, and every step you take brings you closer to your best self. Keep striving, keep shining, and until next time, stay brilliant.